this doesn't happen by chance. There are root cause reasons for the development of all of these chronic symptoms and dysregulation of the body. And, breast implants are one of those root cause level types of things.
Hey everyone, welcome to Evolving Ageless. This is the enlightened woman's antidote to aging. I am your host, Michelle Dreilich, and as you already know, I am on a mission to change the way we age. And so each week I'm joined by experts in their field that are going to share the latest and greatest research and their experiences to help us live and evolve in an ageless way. So I am so excited for today. I know I say that all the time because I have such great guests, but today we're talking about something that lots of women are experiencing, but may not know why, and they may not realize it's a thing. I'm joined today by Sarah Phillipe, and she is a breast implant illness expert. And she's got lots of other credentials about being a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and a true cellular detox practitioner. But she's most widely known for her experience with this idea behind breast implant illness. If you've never heard about it, some bells and whistles might start going off about either yourself or some friends or loved ones that are experiencing some health crises and may have breast implants. And so she believes so firmly in reversing breast implant illness. And it's more than just having them removed, right? It's what happens on the other side of that. So, Sarah, welcome to Evolving Ageless. I am so excited for you to be here.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. I'm just happy to be sharing this information, and it's just really, really important topic.
It really is. All right. So I think probably the best place to start, okay, because I certainly know people that have experienced this and are currently experiencing it, but why don't you share your story with us and what led you
Sure.
to this idea that something was just not right? And it ultimately led you, we always talk about functional medicine here, to the root cause of what was causing your symptoms or illness. So tell us.
Yeah. So, I always start off with the beginning where this all started for me, which is really as a young adolescent girl. I remember the exact moment that I realized how important breasts really are and how much they, in our culture, how much they define who we are as women. And that was, I was young, I was probably 10 or so. And someone really important in my life said to me, "You're going to be 4'11", just like me. But don't worry, you'll have the Johnson boobs." And so that was a really interesting moment in my life. And I think it was a really defining moment in my life as someone, a young girl who's just so impressionable, and we're just still absorbing our world around us and trying to figure out what everything means, and who we are and who we're going to become. And that to me really set the tone. It really defined womanhood for me. And so as it turned out, I didn't get the Johnson boobs. And it was as if I should be worried about that, because in my childhood, I had heard, "Don't worry, you'll have the Johnson boobs." So, it was a real area that I struggled with growing up, and felt very self-conscious about. I used to stuff my bra in middle school. And I just wanted that so badly because of that, pivotal moment in my life. And so, fast forward down the road, late 20s, I started to become really, really interested in fitness. And so I ended up hiring, trainers that train bikini competitors. And my goal really was to get in the best physical shape of my life. It wasn't even about health for me, because I had a really poor diet and lifestyle. But I still just wanted that outward appearance to look a certain way. And so along with that came, the push for breast implants. And that just making that decision. And it wasn't something that my husband was really thrilled about at the time, but I had always wanted it since I was very young. And so I just couldn't think beyond that desire. And so I did make that choice. I went ahead, I got my breast implants placed. And it was really interesting because afterwards it wasn't love at first sight. I didn't look in the mirror and think, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. Like, this is what I've always wanted. It was a process of adjusting to the new me. And every time I looked in the mirror for quite a while, for several months, I would say, it was a mental, emotional stressor, just thinking, like, this isn't my body. Who is this? And feeling kind of at odds with that. And no one really told me that that was even a possibility, that I might feel that way. It wasn't ever something that was discussed. So I just assumed that I would love them, from the get-go. And I really didn't. It took time to adjust to. But, within probably 6 months, I started developing chronic symptoms that were really unexplainable. So I started experiencing things like, chronic fatigue, brain fog, poor word recall, insomnia, irritability, night sweats, bloating, gas, abdominal pain, loose stools. I would say social anxiety. It was really difficult for me to go out into public because any kind of extra stimulation was too much for me. So sound, loud noise, or chemical smells, or bright lights. It was like torture in my body. Just living in my body was like absolute torture. And I started to become mentally aware of every single breath that I took from the moment that I woke up to the moment that I fell asleep, which, that's an autonomic nervous system thing. You're not supposed to be aware of that. It's just supposed to happen naturally.
Right.
And so that was, that went on for 6, 7, 8 months. And that was agony. And so I started looking for answers. This wasn't something that I just, working in the medical field, I knew there was something going on. And I wanted to figure out, what that was so that I could fix myself. And so I looked for help, by going and seeking lab work and opinions of different doctors, and no one really could help me. No one knew what was wrong with me. Everyone that I, talked with just said, your lab work looks normal. There's no problem here. Maybe think about seeing a therapist, which is really common.
Well, that's where medicine goes, right? Conventional medicine goes in that direction when they can't solve the problem, and it's affecting your psychology, right? It's affecting the way you feel. And so maybe that's the natural allopathic response. But I just want to call attention, all of those symptoms independently are common, right?
Yeah,
So
very
to put
common.
them together is the real challenge of it, right? You wouldn't
Yeah.
think my loose stools are related to my breast implants.
No.
It's just not a natural connection. So great. So you're experiencing all of this, you're kind of being dismissed,
Mm-hmm.
and there's nowhere to turn. So what happens next?
Well, it kind of led me down this path of realizing that I was going to need to figure this out on my own, that I wasn't really going to get the help that I needed, even from, the naturopathic doctors or the functional medicine doctors that I saw at the time. Back in that time period, this was like back in 2012, no one was talking about breast implant illness at the time. No one knew anything about it. And so even when I would bring up my breast implants, because I had this kind of hunch, I was in my intuition, I was thinking, I wonder if breast implants could cause this, because I was perfectly fine before I had the breast implants placed. I didn't have a symptom to speak of. And
How old were you? How old were you at this time?
I was 30 years old. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So really unusual symptoms in a 30-year-old.
Yeah. And, the doctors that I saw, or even functional medicine and naturopathic doctors, didn't think it was a problem. And so even though I had that kind of hunch in the back of my mind, I dismissed it, and I continued, down the road of trying to figure out what the root cause of all my symptoms was. I ended up going down the path of doing lots of functional lab work on my own. That's how I discovered the functional diagnostic nutrition program and decided to become a practitioner myself, because no one could help me and I needed to figure out myself, like, what was going on here. So I ended up discovering, my HPA axis was completely dysregulated. My hormones were tanked. I had, chronic Lyme disease. I had parasites and candida overgrowth and SIBO and just all of this toxicity in my body and pathogenic overgrowths in my body, and my immune system was completely dysregulated and so much inflammation. And it ended up continuing, like, this search and trying to work on myself and addressing these, what I thought were root causes, went on for many, many years before I ever decided to explant. And it wasn't until I got to the point of trying to get pregnant and not being able to get pregnant and having those fertility struggles that it really, was the tipping point for me in and just allowing me to take that leap of faith to believe and trust that my instinct is right and have my explant surgery. So
that is a huge step, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so just to be clear, explant means having them removed, right?
Yeah.
So the decision, like, okay, I wanted these. Now I think they're causing illness. I think I want to see what life is like when they're gone.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you book this surgery.
Yeah. And so, I had my explant done. Once I made that decision, it was like 2 months later, I had him out. So it was very quick once I finally committed to that. And, I traveled all the way to Costa Rica for it because at the time I just didn't think that there was anyone in the US who, was skilled enough to do this the proper way. And I had been doing some research for the last couple of years about the whole explant process and making sure it's done properly. So yeah, I had my explant surgery done. That wasn't the end of the road for me. It wasn't this immediate, panacea, so to speak. It wasn't like this magical cure. I still had work to do, and part of that was actually another surgery. So, part of my story involves developing stage 4 endometriosis, which I never had before. I mean, if I did, I didn't know it because I never had any symptoms. But it was so advanced that by the time I ended up having surgery, discovering it and having surgery, I had bowel involvement. I had one fallopian tube was completely blocked. I had vaginal wall involvement. So all of that endometriosis had to be cut out of me.
Very invasive.
Very invasive.
Thrives in an environment of just systemic inflammation, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. This was all being fueled.
Inflammation, yeah.
Yeah. And so I knew that, I needed to first get my breast implants out before I ever dealt with endometriosis because that was fueling the fire.
Yep. Wow.
And so, yeah. And so I didn't even know that entire first 2 years we were trying to get pregnant, that was that huge blocking factor for me. So yeah, it was just really interesting. So that's kind of, the path that I took from getting my breast implants to, trying to figure things out along the way, doing a lot of what we would consider the right things, but just not making progress, just kind of going, it was an uphill battle. It was swimming upstream because of the fact that I didn't really get to that very top root cause.
All right, so let's talk about what it is that's causing this, right? I know, so you're a nurse by training, so it's not like you don't have any experience in this field at the time. You've worked with patients, you understand the body. So tell us first and foremost, so there are silicone implants. What other kinds of implants are there?
Yeah, there's silicone breast implants, and the silicone that's on the market today is the cohesive gel. So we used to have liquid silicone, which is the Dow Corning implants. I think we all remember that from the 80s, which are no longer on the market. But and silicone was banned for quite some time until they started to bring it back in this cohesive gel form, which, it was thought that it would be safe because if there was a rupture, it would stay in place because it's very sticky, and it wouldn't travel throughout the body.
Let's talk about that. So the breast implants I've always seen are like clear, right? And they've got lots of liquid on the inside.
Hmm.
Okay. Is that still the case?
It depends. So the silicone is not liquid anymore. It's a salt.
When you say cohesive, it's solid, but it's rubbery.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
gelatinous. Yeah,
Gelatinous. Right.
yeah.
Okay. Got it.
So the saline breast
You're
implants
like,
are
where's my
liquid. Yeah, I'm like, where are my
got
implants?
it.
I could show you.
Yes.
um, so yeah, the saline does have basically it's a salt solution.
Mhm.
So it's
On the
liquid
inside of
on the
silicone.
inside, and the shell of the saline implants is silicone.
Mhm.
So either way, and regardless of what type of implant you have, there's still silicone that you're being
Got
exposed to.
got it. Mhm.
So, they're a chemical stressor. And the reason they're a chemical stressor is if you were to look up the ingredients, the list of ingredients that are in silicone breast implants, there are like 40 different heavy metals and toxic chemicals in these breast implants. So, and these chemicals are cytotoxic, neurotoxic, and carcinogenic. So we've got, things like methyl ethyl ketone, cyclohexone, acetone, xenol, phenol, but those are all neurotoxins. And we
Right.
have things like toluene and benzene, dichloromethane, which are all carcinogens. We have talcum powder, talcum powder, formaldehyde, lacquer thinner, printing ink, metal cleaning acid. I mean, what are these things doing in breast implants?
Right.
And then we have heavy metals like aluminum, tin, lead, and platinum. And so these are all in addition to the silicone, and the silicone is actually considered an adjuvant in the development of certain autoimmune conditions. So that means they're a trigger.
Mm.
It's a trigger. And so you can't really avoid the silicone because it's in both types of implants. And there were never really any studies done beyond about 6 months.
Mhm.
And we know that the longer they're in the body, the longer, the more risk you have of problems developing. So there were no long-term studies ever done. And the studies that were done on mice, not humans. And what we know now is that these silicone, the new cohesive gel silicone implants, actually start bleeding their contents into the body from day one. So
Wow.
as they're heated to body temperature, they start to bleed those chemicals and heavy metals and silicone into the body. And what's near your breasts is all the lymphatic tissue, tons and tons of lymphatic tissue, which travels throughout your entire body. So you have a situation where silicone implants can bleed and then get into the lymphatic system and travel throughout the entire body, and that ends up creating this neurotoxicity because the chemicals they get into your brain and nervous system.
Wow.
So
So this is different. So just to be clear, because I know there's so much misinformation out there. So some implants, especially in the 80s, those were the kinds that leaked and kind of degraded, and they were, when they were taking them out, they were a mess, right? And
yeah.
so what you're suggesting, and this is important because it's not, I know those are not happening as much today, but what you're saying is it's almost like an off-gassing, like they're leaching
Mm-hmm.
their chemical structure outside of themselves and into the tissue, the surrounding tissue around it.
Yeah,
Which,
exactly.
which, if you go back to episode 7 with Dr. Christine Burke, right, when we talk about inflammation, your immune system finds this stuff. Is that why
Yeah.
that's what's going on, right? And your immune system's like, holy hell, what is this? I don't know what all these things are. These are foreign objects and I need to get rid of them and I need to defend against them, right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
your story is so common in that you were young, healthy. There was nothing. Now imagine if you were predisposed, or maybe you had an autoimmune condition already, or maybe you were having breast implants as part of your breast cancer post-surgical treatment. I mean, you were healthy and developed this. So this is what makes me so anxious, nervous, or just really wanting to share this story is that, we're putting breast implants in people that maybe have an underlying illness to begin with. And so I
Mm-hmm.
would imagine it really can kick off the immune system.
Yeah, exactly. And there. breast implants are more than a chemical stressor as well. They're a foreign object, so they're a physical stressor. And like you said, they're chronically, stimulating the immune system, tiring the immune system, creating this state of, chronic inflammation where, lots of inflammatory cytokines are being recruited to that area, not only because they're a foreign object, but also, what we're discovering as well when women are explanting and we're doing, cultures and looking at the different types of microbes that are growing in and around these implants, we're discovering that there's like 10 to 12 different types of microbes growing inside the capsule around the implants.
So these are
So,
bacteria we're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah,
Like, yeah, wow. So
absolutely. And
your
so,
body is in a state of fight all the
yeah,
time.
exactly. Chronic fight or flight, chronically trying to survive, basically.
Wow.
And so, no wonder all of these symptoms develop. Our body is prioritizing survival over everything else, over every other function. And so, I'll often see, because the immune system has been working so hard, it often becomes more depressed. And so I'll see things like low gut immunity. Looking at lab work, that's really common. So the immune system in the gut is really depressed, and that's our first line of defense against pathogens that enter our body. So you'll often see, these different overgrowths of bacteria or parasites or fungus, things like that, because the defense system is down.
That's exactly
So
right. Yeah.
yeah, and so your body just can't
And it's
fight.
your immune system is weaker because it's revved up all the time and
Mhm.
it's fighting its target is laser focused on this one major problem that it has. And so, in the grand scheme of things, you are probably more susceptible to other diseases and illnesses and opportunistic infections because your immune system was busy. It was occupied. It didn't have time to do what it normally does by finding bacteria, pathogens, viruses, cancer cells. That's what it does. It surveys surveillance throughout your whole body, finding problems and getting rid of them before they become a problem. So if your immune
Mhm.
system's busy, I would imagine it leaves people in a situation where their immune system just can't do its job right.
Yeah, and that also paves the way for autoimmunity to develop,
Yes. Is
which
that
is
common?
something very common. I had Hashimoto's. That was
Mm,
one of the very first things that I thought I had, and I was right. My intuition has always been right this entire process. Um, but that situation developed as a result of this foreign object in my body and all the immune system dysregulation and the gut dysfunction and leaky gut and all of that. So this isn't this doesn't happen by chance. There are root cause reasons for the development of all of these chronic symptoms and dysregulation of the body. And breast implants are one of those root cause level types of things.
right. And here's the crazy thing. I'm very open-minded. I want people to pursue their
Mm-hmm.
happiness, right? And find their happiness. And just like you said, had you not had your implants placed to begin with, you would have felt some sense of unfulfillment. Like it was just nagging at you. And so unfortunately, or fortunately, because look at the work you're doing now, you had to almost go through that experience. So I'm not never coming from a place of judgment because people do
No.
what they feel is right for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want women to know that if indeed you're finding that you're experiencing very distinct system symptoms that are chronic and they're not connected, right? Like you said, you would never connect loose stool and chronic, digestive disorders with chronic fatigue or some of your anxiety, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we know our neurotransmitters are at play as well, they're reacting
Exactly.
to an upregulated immune system. It's amazing. It's just an amazing story. I know someone who also just within a year also went to Costa Rica for her explant.
Oh,
And
okay. Nice.
yeah, yeah. And I've know a few people professionally and personally. And I mentioned this to you before. I've seen their face change, their
Yeah.
structure of their facial features have changed. Their body has changed, where they were always a little fluffier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of systemic inflammation, I guess. But why don't you talk a little bit about that? Like what things women are experiencing that after explant?
Yeah, that is definitely one thing I can relate to for sure, that just chronic inflammation and seeing that reflected in my appearance. I always was just so puffy, my face, my eyelids, my body in general. I had a lot of trouble losing weight, and I would gain weight very easily. Um, and after the implants came out, it took time. Of course, it wasn't this overnight fix. Like I said, it took a lot of self-care, a lot of work to restore normal function. And so oftentimes what women will experience is just that immediately maybe feeling a bit more energetic, less fatigue. That inflammation starts to go down, so they'll start to see those physical appearance improvements. For me, my face did look less puffy, my eyes did look less swollen, but there were periods of time where I was puffy and swollen again for a while. And it's really this process of healing. Healing doesn't happen in a straight line. There are ups and downs along the way, and you really have to address, like, all of the things that are blocking factors to your healing, like detoxing the body. These toxins are being stored in our tissues and in our bone. And so we really need to be working on detoxing that out, because symptoms don't typically develop until the bucket is overflown. And so we need to work on emptying that toxic bucket. And we're living in such a toxic time in our history. And we're exposed to so many different sources of toxins. So it's, we really need to be working on decreasing the toxins that are coming in as well, that we're exposed to on a daily basis. And that is really helpful for down regulating inflammation and for reducing oxidative stress in the body, which is, your body aging very quickly.
Yeah. So I want to just mention, we talk about detoxification on Evolving Ageless a lot. And, it's a word for sure in healthcare that has been way overused.
Oh yeah.
Um, people think of detoxing as cleanses.
Hmm.
I'm going to drink green juices and I'm detoxing. Not that you're not, but in a true clinical setting, which is what you're talking about. So I just want to really clarify it because our liver has 8 different major jobs, and one of them is to clean up toxins. And when I say toxins, I mean things like caffeine in your coffee,
Hmm.
alcohol, um, uh, any kind of chemical, medications, things like that. So when we hear the word detoxify, we always think of either substance abuse or we think of some kind of woo-woo colon cleanse. But the reality is supporting your liver to do its job is what detoxification really is. And that's what you're talking about. Having all of these chemicals and metals and pathogens, bacteria in your body has to get rid of it. And it
Hmm.
takes time to do that. But also, if there's a lot of a burden, your body may not do it so well. And some of us are genetically predisposed to not doing it well to begin with. And so, what you're talking about in terms of detoxification is something you should absolutely work with a practitioner on, someone that understands how the timing of it. I've seen people that starting a detox too aggressively can pivot them and throw them into a crisis. So I just want to be clear that people should not just undertake this lightly on their own and think they can walk into a health food store and grab a colon cleanse off the shelf and they're detoxing. But
Exactly.
yeah, so great. So I love what you're saying because, making the decision to explant is the first big step at calming down that inflammation, but the work, it sounds like, really happens after that.
Yeah, it really does. That the explant is step one. It's removing the source, right? Which is a hugely important step. And without that step, you really won't make a whole lot of progress, which is what I discovered with my own journey. Um, And then, afterward, really how I approach detoxes, like you said, we're really wanting to support the detox pathways. So, really nourishing and supporting and opening up your liver and your kidneys and your lymphatic system and making sure you're moving your bowels regularly. That's crucial.
Yep.
And, reestablishing methylation, which is, a huge part of why a lot of us are sick. And, supporting glutathione production, which is a hugely important part of detoxification. Your master antioxidant, you can't detox without it. And typically what I see is women are trying to do detox work on their own, and they may be using really strong products and they end up crashing because they're not supporting these other things.
And so just to be clear, if we took an apple and cut it in half and sat it on the counter, right? We
Yep.
all have all seen it. It turns brown, right? So this is what oxidative stress is in our bodies, right? And so when we talk about glutathione, people are used to antioxidants like vitamin C is an antioxidant, right? Vitamin A. So what we're talking about is glutathione is the master antioxidant. It's the most potent one that we use in our body, and we make it out of various vitamin C and vitamin A and things like that. And so glutathione is what is this, in essence, if you've ever put lemon juice or pineapple juice on an apple and it doesn't turn brown, it's because you're reducing the oxidative stress and that's an antioxidant, right? So
Yes.
the same thing. So I love this idea that we need to and foods give us glutathione, right? Things like
Mm-hmm.
broccoli and all the cruciferous vegetables, they give us sulforaphanes and different things like that. So
Yep.
that's incredible. So all of this is important. It's not just about getting rid of your implants.
Yeah, yeah. And most women who are suffering with symptoms as a result of implants are, the detox pathways are shut down. And so those pathways, when we start working on opening them back up again, your body really does start dumping toxins on its own.
Yep. Yep.
And so that's kind of part of the process I encourage. But, it's also important to make sure, other sources of toxins are removed as well. So I'm not just looking at breast implants, that's part of the picture, but I don't believe it's the only part of why people are sick, why women are sick with breast implants. I think there's typically several things that come together to create this perfect storm situation where the body just starts breaking down. And so we really need to look at all the additional sources of stress on the body and start working on addressing those. So it can be other types of chemical or heavy metal stressors like mercury amalgam fillings. It can be other types of infections like cavitations in the jaw, or infections that were once dormant that have become reactivated, or parasites or candida or things like that. It's important to address not just, it's important to not just go on a bug killing spree, though. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we need to work on the whole person and addressing why those things are allowed to wreak havoc in the body, and working on addressing the terrain inside the body so that these things can't thrive, and your immune system can function properly the way it's supposed to, and things come back into balance.
Oh, I'm so sorry. How long did it take for you to feel like your old self again?
It was probably about 6 months of working on, detoxing my body and just doing the things that I needed to do to um, bring balance back. So that involved food, that involved, mindset work, and really exercising the parasympathetic system, because we've been in this chronic state of fight or flight for so long. So that takes work, and addressing the things that were still stress in my life, like being overscheduled and perfectionism and saying yes too often to everyone for everything, that creates a lot of stress. So it's about, addressing all the different types of stress. And at that 6 month point, I felt quite good, but that was when I also went ahead and had my second surgery. And so there was a whole recovery process after that as well, which was a long process. And so I would say probably about at the 1 year mark is when I felt my best. And
Wow.
it's going to vary from person to person. I mean, we're all
Sure. And
dealing.
you had access to the tools that you needed, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's
I had a plan from the get-go.
mhm.
And so, it's going to vary from person to person as far as how long it takes, what types of things you need to be doing, because we're all different. We're all exposed to different types of stressors, and we all have different genetic factors at play as well.
Mhm. And I think functional medicine has really, and integrative medicine have evolved, naturopathic medicine, all of those have evolved in a place that if you presented today, it would be a very different story. It would be the probably one of the first things that they honed in on. And it's a
Yes.
delicate subject because it's a lot like mercury fillings, right? Like to have a conversation that says, I think you're going to need to explant. Like that's a life altering event, surgery, expense,
Hmm.
uncertainty, and maybe not even wanting to do that, right? So there's a
Right.
lot there, but I think if you find yourself, anyone listening right now or seeing this right now, if you find yourself in a situation where you or someone you know or love share this with them, but um, you know, it's not too late. I mean, you can absolutely takes action and start moving in the direction of explant and the subsequent cleanup. And maybe you're not ready right now. That's why we call this evolving ageless, right?
Yeah.
Where it's an evolution. You'll get there when you get there, but in the short term, you can start at least helping your body eliminate toxins, right? And when we talk about toxins, I may have said this before, but they tend to be more fat soluble. So if you're overweight, you're storing them in fat and they're really accumulating in your body. If you're not, if your liver is overtaxed. And when you're systemically inflamed, that's one of the ways that your liver gets overtaxed. So these are things that you should absolutely talk to a professional about. I know you work
Hmm.
one-on-one with women as well, but I also love that Sarah's created a neurotoxic questionnaire. So whether you have breast implants or not, I think we should all be taking a neurotoxic questionnaire to understand if the pesticides on our lawn and the chemicals they're spraying on our food and just our exposure in our environments, our work, whatever it be, if it's having an effect on us. And so you can go to evolvingageless.com right in the show notes for this episode. And not only will you have access to Sarah, the links that you need if you're interested in Facebook or her website and things like that are all available there. But also, Sarah has a link to her neurotoxic questionnaire. So if you're a little curious to see what impact your environment is having on your body and maybe the symptoms that you've experienced, this is a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I love
Yeah.
the neurotoxic questionnaire because it's just that like unbiased way of kind of looking at things, looking at the big picture and really assessing, what you're struggling with on a day-to-day basis and how much and and what that means overall. People are always really surprised when they see their score on that questionnaire.
Yep, they sure are. I know. Even when you think it's because most of us feel like we're doing the right thing, and at the end of the day, we're doing the right thing for the information that we have.
Hmm.
I certainly have many examples of where I thought I was doing the right thing, and learned otherwise. So, that's the problem with the internet and science in general is that it's evolving. And so it's the problem, but the good news is going back to basics will never hurt you. Eating healthy,
Exactly.
clean foods, exercising, drinking lots of water, the basics will never hurt you. So
Yes.
when in doubt, go back to basics. So,
Absolutely.
so do you have any other specific advice for women that maybe where to start, what
Hmm.
resources should they call the doctor that implanted them? Is there a different kind of doctor that does explant?
Absolutely. So, in general, I can't say this across the board, but in general, I would say the doctor who put your implants in isn't likely going to be the kind of surgeon that you want to see for your explant. Most of the surgeons still putting implants in are, that's their bread and butter. And most of the time, they're not going to acknowledge breast implant illness or breast implants being a problem or a reason for your symptoms. Most of the time, they're not going to do the explant procedure properly, which is really, really important for recovery. So I highly recommend taking a look at, doing a little research and taking a look at the different top explant surgeons. And so those people can be found on a website. It's not my website, but it's a website called breastimplantillness.com. So that's a really helpful resource to start kind of looking through, who you might be able to see, have a consultation with near you in your area. And so all the surgeons are listed by country and state there. There is a particular procedure that needs to be done for the proper explant, and that is en bloc. Which means that the implants and the capsules around the implant, which is the scar tissue the body forms to protect you from the implant. So that should be a good sign right there that they're not good for you.
Right.
That those things need to be removed together as one unit on each side. So rather than cutting the capsule open, and removing the implant and then, leaving the capsule in, which is what most surgeons will do. Those two need to come out together as one. So the reason for that is because if you have a rupture, whether you have saline or silicone, with silicone specifically, you're not going to know if you have a rupture until the surgery. Imaging is not foolproof. So you can't be relying on imaging to give you an answer one way or the other, whether you haven't a rupture or not. So if you do have a rupture, you risk being exposed to all of that material and that getting into your lymphatic system on a much bigger level than if you hadn't cut that capsule open. And then, of course, we know there's microbes in the capsule that are growing in there. So we also don't want to expose you to that. And so if we remove those en bloc, then your risk of that exposure is so much lower. And we also need to make sure that the surgeon during the explant is able to go back in and remove every little speck of capsule, because that is the scar tissue that your body created to protect you, and it's an inflammatory tissue, and it typically does contain some of those chemicals from your breast implants, and so it is a source of chronic inflammation. So if any of that capsule is left behind, you can still be sick after your explant. So that's important. And that really takes a lot of skill, because a lot of the time that capsule is adhered to the ribs or the fatty tissue or the muscle tissue. And so it takes a lot of skill to do that safely and to feel comfortable as a surgeon with your skill to be able to get all of that out. So a lot of surgeons won't even do that because they don't have that kind of skill. They're not comfortable, and they think that the risk outweighs the benefit. So that's really, really important.
Specific skill set that you're looking for.
It is.
If you're taking these measures, you should go the distance and get someone that really, this is what they do, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, you want to choose someone who's done hundreds, if not thousands, of these proper explant procedures, not someone who just discovered it yesterday and is jumping on the bandwagon.
Right. So what a great resource. So as I said before, you'll find access to Sarah, especially, and her Neurotoxic Questionnaire and the links that we discussed here today on evolvingageless.com, right in our show notes. So it's always simple. You just know right where to go. But man, what amazing insight we have here today. I'm so glad. I'm so excited to meet with you and discuss this, because I've been hearing about it more and more. And I just think it's a discussion that maybe a lot of women are experiencing issues, but haven't even considered that it could be related to their breast implants. So Sarah, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule. I know you are busy helping women each and every day, to be here to share this important message, because I think you're making a difference, a significant difference in the lives and the health of women going forward, the fertility, the health, the everything of women going forward.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure, truly. I'm just glad to be able to put, this information out there and hopefully turn some light bulbs on.
Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone you know, they may not even be telling you that they have symptoms. They're maybe living with them thinking that it's normal. Anyone you know that has breast implants may benefit from hearing about this story. So absolutely share this with anyone that you know that could benefit. So in the meantime, I will be here the same time and the same place each week. And a huge thanks to Sarah for taking time out of her day to share this story. And next week, we'll share other insights from other medical experts. So, in the meantime, keep on living ageless, and I will see you soon.